Okay. We are nearing, actually, which is a milestone, we're nearing the end of Perek Dalet, yeah. Now, the Ramchal speaks a lot about ideas about the significance of Torah, but I had covered that, in a lot of the stuff in the Ramchal's Yotzai Shir. A lot of the ideas of the significance of what Torah really is, and so on. So what the Ramchal says now, he tries to summarize. And what he says is that everything that happens, whether for the good or for the bad, is determined by one idea only. And that is what's called the ha'ora, the enlightenment, or the illumination, or the Hester, the concealment, the diminishment of the presence of God. This is what he says. In other words, that if you're close to God, so to speak, and therefore there's a tremendous infusion of God's presence, then everything goes phenomenal. If the reverse is true, that there is a distancing from you and God, right, and therefore the presence of God is concealed in whatever degree it is, then things are the reverse. Then things are, when they proceed much worse. Obviously that's a very general statement, and so on, we can understand at least some of the ideas from that, because we know, if you remember from the previous Shurim, we know that what the Rebbeinu Shalom is at least the way he manifests himself to us, is existence per se. And therefore, obviously, if the Rebbeinu Shalom is sort of like close to you, then he gives you much more existence, which always is good. The more existence you have, obviously, that's always a very good sign. If, however, the Rebbeinu Shalom is distant from you, then there's a detraction of the flow of existence, so to speak, and as a result of that, things, of course, get much worse. So, that's just one simple way of understanding what the Ramchal is saying, because the Ramchal doesn't really explain. Well, what does it mean that God is close to you? Well, what is the illumination of God's being close? What does that really mean? Nor does he explain in much more detail, what does it mean that God's presence is diminished or removed from you? What is that supposed to mean? You see. But at least in a certain way we can understand that, like I said, in terms of the fact that God, his manifestation to this Bria, creation, is that he is existence itself. Remember when I once said, does God have existence? And the answer, of course, is no. He is existence itself. He doesn't have it, he is it, which is a whole different way of understanding. So therefore, that's one of the ways you can understand what Ramchal says, what he's trying to say, and so on. And of course, what he's saying also is that it's not only the presence or absence, but to the degree of presence. There are what's called gradations of presence and absence. So clearly, the greater the amount of presence, the greater is the benefit that a person will receive, and the greater the diminishment of presence, correspondingly, obviously, that will be a much greater form of non-benefit or detriment.
You said way back when that there's existence, getting more existence is a feature of Olam Haba.
Yes, so I mentioned that. Yeah.
And you said that in Olam Hazeh, what's happening is the quality of the existence. Is that what you mean, or is?
Well, Olam Haba, the attachment that you have to God in Olam Haba, is incomprehensible. In other words, what God did is He created a certain boundary, a certain amount. He said, okay, I can either be close to you or distant from you in terms of a certain amount. That's all. So within that small sphere, if you want to look at it, right, I can either be close or distant. Okay. But that is only one dimension. In Olam Haba, the dimension of whatever we'll experience in Olam Haba is completely different than what we understand. It's like, I hate to say it, but it's like the little leagues. And the little leagues, where little kids play baseball. It's an American example. And then it's not even the minor leagues, because that's already adults. It's the major leagues, So how do you compare the little leagues and the major leagues? You can't. I mean, it's just two different experiences. Unless your kid is on the baseball team, then it becomes very exciting. But if not, it's a whole different kind of experience, But so this is where he explains it. Ramchal many times is very general, doesn't give you enough meat, to hang on to and say, okay, what does he mean? But we can, at least from previous shurim, we can have some type of an understanding of what Ramchal's saying, And then what he says, something is really very interesting. The question is, does the Rebbe illuminate more or less toward each person? That's the question. When the Rebbe decides to diminish his illumination or his presence to a person, does God really diminish his presence? That is the question. You see? So what the Ramchal says is really very, very important. What he says is that the Rebbe never diminishes his presence. It's always there. What the person does, right, the diminishment takes place not because God diminishes his presence, is because man erects a barrier. That's the point. It was not that Hashem says, okay, you're not doing my mitzvahs or whatever, you're sinning whatever, so therefore I will diminish your presence. No. That's always the presence of God. Once it has been established that it's there, will never be diminished. What a person can do is create barriers, and therefore the barrier obviously will create diminishment. So that's a very important idea, you see. Because when you think about it, you create the barrier, not God. If God created the diminishment, so you'd have to coax God into, okay, let me have more of you. You know what I'm saying? Because it has to do with you, obviously. God is responding to you, right? But then God would have to increase his presence, you see. But if it's not the case, if it is the person that diminishes the presence of God because he creates a wall, a barrier, right? Then you have a much more direct input into the barrier. You can either increase the barrier, right? Or you can remove the barrier. It has nothing to do with God, So therefore you are much greater direct control of what is and what is not, which is really, in a certain sense, much better, because it's directly up to you. And obviously you create the barrier in typical gradations. You can create more of a barrier, less of a barrier. You see, that's a very important idea, that the diminishment comes from us, not from him. You see. And obviously, when you create a barrier, not only do you disturb the amount of illumination of the presence of God, you see, but what's worse is you create sort of like, in the absence of the presence of God, right, something else takes place, and that's the whole concept of mesaken. So it's really two things going on. The first tragedy is what? Is where you have, in certain sense, pushed away God by creating a rift or barrier, a wall, right, between you and him. But the second thing is that nature abhors a vacuum. So what happened is that that is filled with the presence of the mesaken. His zoyama, his projection, now fills that space. Because if you have kept God out, then he fills the space that you have removed the presence of God. And that's really a very important concept of what the tragedy is. And Tisha B'Av, actually we're in the 3 weeks, which is interesting, But we will see how this is so important in Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, when we mourn the temple, what the true Chorban is. Remember, there's two concepts going on here. There's the churban that you've created a barrier for the presence of God. And the second churban is you've allowed entry to the satanic forces. That's a second type of churban that most people don't realize, and so on, So this is a very important idea that the Ramchal says. In many ways, a good example, which I think is brought by people, it's like the sun. The sun never stops shining, But if you're in a house and it goes through a window, you could paint the window black, and you won't be able to. There'll be no sunlight entering. So it's not because the sun has diminished. The reason why it's dark is because you have created a barrier, right? You've painted the window black, and that's why the light doesn't enter. You see, and as a result of that, in many ways, like I said, you can control the presence or the absence of God. It's a very important idea. I think it was the Kotzker. The Kotzker once said, "Where is God? Where is God?" I think I once said this. Where is God? And he answered as in the Kotzker manner, because the Kotzker Rebbe was very, very sharp. He said, "Well, you know where God is? Wherever you let Him in." See that? And he was right. Exactly. That's what it means. It's up to you. It's not up to Him. He's there. He's knocking on your door. You want to let Him in? Fine. You don't want to let Him in? That's up to you. Wherever you let Him in. The Kotzker always had these brilliant ways of understanding something. I remember he once said, it says, "Roi l'chol yirei shemayim" in Shulchan Aruch. There's a simon there. It is appropriate and proper of each God-fearing person, right? Sheidoyeg, that he should be very concerned and mourn the destruction of the temple. So the Kotzker says, what do you mean Yirei Shemayim? Why is it only appropriate for somebody who fears God to do this? And if you don't fear God, you shouldn't have to be concerned about the destruction of the bais hamikdash? That's what the Kotzker says. And the Kotzker answers, yeah. Because if you're not a Yirei Shemayim, you have to be concerned about your own destruction. Not the bais hamikdash, you see? Yeah, he kind of comes with, he just belts out these incredible ideas, that's why, So if you're Yirei Shemayim, so you're concerned about the destruction of the temple. You're not Yirei Shemayim, you gotta be concerned about your own destruction. It's more important at the present time, So there's many other statements that the Kotzker said, But anyway, that's what he said. He said, where is God? Anywhere you let Him in, I remember my son once came home, so he said that in his class, he was a little kid then, said in his class the Rebbe said, "Who knows where God is?" A bunch of 7-year-old kids, whatever, So the Rebbe said, who knows where God is? So guys were saying, He's in heaven, He's this, See what a 7-year-old kid answers, So one guy said, He's in the bathroom. God is in the bathroom. So the Rebbe looked at the kid and said, "Excuse me, what? He's in the bathroom?" So why do you say that? So the kid said, "I'll tell you why. Because when my father goes to the bathroom, and he's there who knows how long, so my mother says, you have to know Yiddish and I'll translate it, God, please come out. Oh God, please come out." So he assumed, therefore, that God is in the bathroom. My kid told me that when he was like 7, 8 years old. I never forgot it because it was like, what can you say, Somehow it loses in the translation. In Yiddish it's like, it's great, it's please God, oh God, come out already, What was that?
In French also it works well.
In French, what is that? You say it in French?
It works well also.
It's what?
It works well.
It works well also?
Yeah, very well.
Okay, But Yiddish, it works out great, But anyway, so this is what the Ramchal says. And clearly, he adds, the Rav Moshe Chaim Sato adds, in closing this chapter, that what is the way to get to create and remove a barrier or to diminish a barrier. So he says the way is the mitzvahs, is the commandments of God. If you do the mitzvahs, then what happens? Then the barrier is not created. You see, there's no barrier, so therefore you will be receptive to the full illumination of God. If, however, you do sinning, then sin, chet, creates a barrier, right? And as a result of the barrier, you will receive much less of the illumination, and therefore you've created the barrier, and there'll be much less. You see, and I once explained why. Because remember, every mitzvah ultimately is a testimony, if you recall, of Einod Milvadoi. Besides God, there is nothing else. If you recall that, when a person does a mitzvah, what he's really doing, he's suspending his own will. And he's saying, I want to do what God commanded and not me, because God is really the only will that exists. So, measure for measure. Since you believe that God is the only being that exists, the only will, therefore, right, measure for measure, He will appear to you, and you will experience that will. But if you sin, what you're really saying is that besides God's will, there's also mine, because I can do whatever I want. So measure for measure, God will say, listen, if you hold yourself to be an independent being from me, fine. So I will disappear, so to speak, or I will remove my illumination. It's measure for measure. And what that does is that concept of sin creates a barrier called I am. It's really what the barrier is. You know, it doesn't mean literally create a wall. The wall is your belief. It's really what it is. When you sin, what you've done is you've erected a belief that you are somebody. And the more you believe you're somebody, to that extent, God will say, well, if you're somebody, right, then I will diminish the fact that I am everything. You see, that's the wall. The wall is the belief. You know, we actually sit there, construct a wall. No, the wall is what you believe. It's a very important concept, that your belief can form a barrier. It's amazing when you think about that. It's all it is. It's what I believe. You know what I'm saying? But it is the belief itself that forms the barrier. You see? So if you believe that you're somebody, Yeshoid Milvadoi, besides God there's somebody else. So therefore God responds to that belief and says, if that's how you feel, then I will justify your feeling and I will cease to be involved in your life. If, however, the reverse, where you make a statement where I believe that you're the only one that exists, the God says, based on your belief, right, that will now justify your experiencing me directly. You have to remember one thing, which is very important. God is a shadow. His behavior is like a shadow, right? A shadow does not move on its own, right? Every instant that you move, the shadow will move exactly what you do, you know? So what God decreed, which is interesting, that in this world, He is a shadow, you see? He does exactly what you do. You move right, He moves right. You move left, He moves left, you see? That's a very important idea. And therefore, God, what is the shadow of God? What does He respond to? He responds to your beliefs and your declaration. Very important idea, you see. If you believe that Einod Milvadoi, He will respond to that and demonstrate to you and allow you to experience Einod Milvadoi, which means besides God there is nothing else. He will be far more active in your life, you see. And I want to tell you something. You don't have to be Jewish to experience that. It's a mistake people make. God will respond the exact same way to Goyim. You know. I once read something. There was a story about a group of kids that went with a priest. You know, and they were stuck somewhere in Nevada. Whatever, in their travels, I think their car broke down. It was a guy, a priest. Was he a priest or pastor? Whatever it was, you know. As they say, he was a man of the cloth. anyway. And he took a whole bunch of guys with him. And they went touring, So somewhere in the middle of nowhere, their car broke down. And it was a very untraveled road. It's bad news, you know what I'm saying? So the kids were tremendously worried. It was I think it was a Reader's Digest novel. It wasn't a novel, it's a real travelogue, I hate to quote Reader's Digest, but listen. I read this 30 years ago, whatever, So they were all, the guys, the teenagers, 16, 17, they were tremendously concerned. They're going to drop dead in this place. There's no water, the car's broken, and there's nobody on the road, So the guide, who was a priest, or he was a clergy, or one of them, right? He said, "What are you worried about? Hey, look, God loves us." It's incredible, He said, "Don't worry about it. God loves us. He's not going to let us die in this desert. Don't worry, you got to believe in God. And he's gonna come, The minute he finished that statement, there was some guy coming over the horizon on the road. The mamash, literally, it was astounding. That's a tremendous, as I said, Musa Haskell, That doesn't make a difference if you're Jewish or not, God will respond to anybody that believes in him. And he will come to assist them. So, so like I say, it's not just for Jews. For Jews, certainly it's like that. But for any person that believes in God, God is that type of a being that he will respond to anybody that believes who he is. So that's very good, because a belief can be changed rapidly. You just have to alter your belief in who the Rebbe Hashem is and his power, and automatically you can let him in. It's that quick. It's that quick, and so on. Yeah.
There are people that have faith in God. They believe in God.
Yes.
But they don't have that much trust. And I think the lever of letting to feel God's presence or let him direct your life is to have more batak, to have more trust. That story illustrated that guy had trust in God. And it happened. But the Greeks, Aristotle, Socrates, they thought there was a God, but that he didn't influence people's lives intimately.
Yeah, Aristotle.
But in the Torah, God's and in the prayers, it's always saying, "I took you out of Egypt with a strong hand," not an angel. That shows that he is intimately
connected,
affecting people's lives.
Yes.
Everybody's.
Yes. However, I once told you the difference between faith and trust. Remember that share? What the difference between faith and trust is? What the difference between emun and bitochen? Faith and trust, right? So to have faith means to believe in a supreme being that runs the world, right? That is capable of doing anything, right? Trust is different. Trust means I believe that what he said he will do, he will do. And I gave you, remember then, a very interesting example. If you borrow money from the mafia, right? And they tell you, let's say you take $50,000, you want to borrow it for 1 week, so they say, okay, but it's 100% every week. It's loan sharking, you know what I'm saying? So they said, and the guy, if you don't give us the money back in a week, and so on and so forth, we'll take out your knees. Begin the process, and the guy comes the end of the week, guy doesn't have the 50, doesn't have the 100 grand to give back to the mafia guys, So what does he do? He runs away. If you run away, that's bitochen. He has faith, he has trust in the mafia that they will do as they say they will do. That's trust, yeah. To trust means that I believe that the person says something and he will do what he says he will do. That's trust. In other words, he said he promises to do something and he's going to do it. I trust that he will do as he said. To believe faith is that he exists, but that he will keep his promises, that's bitochen. And it works not only in the positive, but I believe it works in anything, And what did God say he will do? He said, and God, your God, loves you. Wow. That means we have trust that he will act as a being that loves us. Hu avicha koinecha He is your father, one who owns you. So therefore we have trust that he will act as a father, which obviously is a being. Father is infinite love, right? And then it says, you are children of God. Therefore we have trust that God will treat us as children, obviously. So therefore we have complete trust in God that he will do what he said he will do. That's trust. So there's so obviously that's the difference. Many people confuse the two, but they're really two distinct characteristics. You see, faith and trust are two different types of things. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, when you do a mitzvah, so we saw on a cosmic level, you do a mitzvah, you're bringing kedusha to the world. Today you're discussing about what happens to me when I do a mitzvah. I let down this barrier between me and Hashem, and I let His presence illuminate on me more and more. Is there a connection between those two things, or it's two separate processes happening
Between
at the
two
same
things. Which two things?
We have spoken about doing a mitzvah is on a cosmic level. When you do a mitzvah, you bring down kedusha to the world.
Yes.
Gilui Shechina to the world.
Yes.
Today we're talking about how I just let down the
shefa, the ha'ora,
onto me.
the enlightenment. Yeah.
Is this the same process just happening on a general level and on a personal level?
Yes.
At the same time, it's two
Yeah.
different processes.
No. It's a simultaneous. Yeah, because see what it really is that, let's assume like the team. Let's say a basketball team, right? Right. The object is to win, which means to get the most points, but it's not an individual effort. It's a team effort, right? So ultimately, each person can contribute to the team effort. In other words, if a guy puts the ball into the basket, right, then he scores a point. So he gets the point. But that point means his team will win, right? So it's not just for him, it's also for his team. Same idea. When a person does mitzvahs, what he does is he brings down a tremendous illumination. However you want to look at it. Remove the barrier, however you want to look at the mechanics. You know what I'm saying? But what he does is he rectifies by bringing the presence of God into a place that is devoid of that presence. He brings, but since all the Jewish people are assigned just different areas of the creation. So ultimately, he illuminates or enlightens one area, but at the same time, the whole creation has to be illuminated. So he contributes to the ultimate illumination of the entire cosmos, as you say, creation. So you're really doing both at the same time, because each Jew is not an individual Jew; he's a member of a team. That's the important idea. It's a team effort. The Ramchal calls that team effort, or he calls the rectification of the Bria, Tikkun HaKloli. Tikkun HaKloli means there's the all-encompassing, the general rectification. You see, one Jew is not assigned the whole thing. The only Jew, well, I wouldn't call him Jewish, but the only man ever given the job of being able to rectify all of it by one guy is Adam Harishon. He could have done the entire job himself. Once he failed, then the whole cosmos, the creation, was given to individuals. So therefore, it's really a team. There is no one person anymore who does that job, you see.
Yeah, I'm connected to one part of creation.
Yes, exactly.
So when I rectify my part, I rectify this part of creation.
Yes, but really, the job isn't just that one part. It's the whole creation. So you really become part of a team effort. So therefore both happen in terms of what you did, and the fact that in terms of what the team has to do, it's also being done. So it's really both at the same time. Yeah.
When you say the Shema Yisrael, you're not talking to God, are you? You're talking to the team. You're talking to the rest of Israel.
Yeah. Here Israel. It's a declaration.
God is one.
Yes, correct. It is a declaration of a belief. That's what Shema Yisrael is. When you declare that, right? You are declaring it. Well, actually, when you really think about it, it's not just declaring it to others. You're really declaring it to yourself. It's a professing of a belief that you believe. You know, you could have said,
Who am I talking to?
you're talking to yourself, really. When you say, hear Israel, right? What you're really saying is, listen, guys, you know, in a certain sense, or I should listen to myself. God is one. You see.
See, I read that you take the letters of Yisrael,
Yeah,
it has all the...
yeah. Ayin Dalet, Aid, and Da.
The adults, the fathers, and, you know.
Okay, those are remozim, those are allusions and so on.
Really?
But the essential
So I'm not
idea.
talking to the forefathers and the
No,
matriarchs.
no. You're professing a belief to really to yourself. I mean, you are Israel. You could say, "Hear Israel, I am Israel." Let me talk to myself, you know, and so on. You know, that's what you would do. In any case, so this is what the Ramchal says is what about the concept of that all illuminations and all disilluminations, right? It all depends on your belief statements and your acts. It's really both. So if you act in the proper way with the proper intent, the barrier will be removed and you will bring God closer into your life. And if you do the reverse, then God will respond like a shadow in the reverse, and therefore you will be less subject or privy to the illumination of God. This is what Ramchal ends off the fourth parak, and so on. It's very important ideas and so on. Okay, we have actually made it to the fifth parak. What the Ramchal is now about to do, which is really very interesting, he's now about to identify what are the different beings or components of creation that God made. What are they? You know, and what he's going to try to do is classify them. He's not going to say, well, he created tigers and this and that. No. He's going to classify what's called the general classification of what types of beings that God make. And obviously each one has a specific function. This is what the Ramchal is about to go into. It's also a very interesting area and so on and so forth.
What do you mean by being?
Beings. Entities.
Entities?
Things.
Things means material.
Yeah, well, no, that's not the material. Things that exist, that's an entity. A being, an entity, a thing that has existence, right? And has functions. So the Ramchal is now going to go into the totality of all the different classes of beings that God created. That's what he's going to do now. Okay. It's like a tour of the cosmos, in a certain sense, you know. So the Ramchal says that if you want to look at the beings or entities that God created, basically there are two overarching categories. Only two of them. There are physical or material beings, and there are spiritual beings. These are the two classes. You're either spiritual or you are material or physical. Now what's important to remember, by the way, is God is not, people make a mistake, God is of course not physical, but he's not spiritual either. God is not a spiritual being, even though we would tend to think of him more spiritual, obviously, than physical. But the Rebbe Hashem is not spiritual. You know, what God is we have no comprehension of who he is, what he is, how he functions in and of himself. It's called atzmusai. He, insofar as himself, we have absolutely no comprehension of what he is. All we know about him is what he does. I should say, all we know about him is what he has chosen to tell us what he does. Let's put it that way, you know. What he does, we have no idea. God has never revealed to anybody the totality of his acts. You see, And like I say, we what we do know, or we try to know, is what he does is that he made a creation. Okay? And the creation that he made is this world. It's not a world only, it's the totality of all the creation that he made. However, what God could have done, obviously, is he could have made an infinite amount of different creations. None of any of the creations, right, replicate or duplicate anything in anything else, which is beyond comprehension. We can't even grasp what he made in this creation. When you think about how many different scientists estimate there are over 100 million species, between 10 and 100 million different species. Could you believe? And these are just life forms. And besides that, God created also what? The inanimate universe, stars, right? All of this is inanimate, And besides that, God created, not just that, but there are 7 fundamental elements to this world, which is interesting. 7. And God created each one. And the composite of all 7 is really this universe, this physical universe. 1. What are they? Because this is it's called the broad sweep of the fundamental elements of this creation. So the first idea is he created space. We don't know what space is. You see, space fundamentally is really nothing. You really think about that. How could nothing be something? If you really think about that, how could nothing be something? In fact, if you go outside, let's assume you're in a rocket ship and you go upstairs, you're outside the atmosphere, right? And while you're in outer space, you put your hand here, then you put your hand here, right? Now, right? But the question is, what is between this hand and this hand? Nothing. Am I right? Nothing there. Yet, if there was nothing there, so why is your hand here and the other hand is here? So the answer is, there is something there. It's called space. What in the world is space? Really? You see? So God created space, and then he created time. And nobody knows what time is, really. I like to define time, right? Time is the endurance of matter. It enables matter to endure. It's a continuity of existence, so to speak. But what exactly does that mean? Unknown. So nobody knows what space is. Nobody knows really what time is, right? And then, of course, God created what's called matter. Matter. Matter is something that takes up space and time. You see? And nobody really knows what matter is. It's interesting, I mean, they used to think in terms of matter that you can, ultimately you'll reach the fundamental particle of matter. But not really. So they used to think it was the compounds, and then they went down to the molecules. Then they realized the molecules themselves are made up of atoms. Then they realized the atoms itself are made up of subatomic particles, electrons and nucleus and so on, protons and so on. Then they realized that the protons themselves are made up of what's called the quarks, you see? And a quark is like, you can't imagine how small a quark is, and so on, Now, maybe the quark itself is made up of something,
Right.
which is called strings. Although I don't know where that theory is going lately. It's not really doing that well. You don't hear much about strings anymore, But, and strings are almost infinitesimal pieces of something, you see. Nobody knows. Nobody knows where the end of all of this is, and so on, So God created space, time, and matter, and of course, God created energy. And nobody has any idea of what energy is. I love these definitions of energy, it's a capacity to do work. What? Work? What's the capacity? What does that mean, the capacity to work? Yeah, the result of having energy is that you can work. But what is energy? It's not a definition. You see, nobody really knows what energy is. So we have the four basic elements of the Bria: space, time, matter, and energy. Yes? That's four unknowns. Then the fifth unknown is called life. Think about that. And nobody has nobody knows what life is. You know, some people want to define it this way, define it that way, but in the end, nobody knows what it is to live. Is a virus alive? I mean, it looks like it's alive because it can bring you down to bed. You know what I'm saying? You know, it looks like it's alive because it really can make you sick and so on, you know? But what does that mean? It's not living. It's not a living thing that you could say, you know, but it does, but it looks like it's alive, so nobody knows what life is really. So that's number 5. Number 6, consciousness. Nobody knows what consciousness is really. I mean, consciousness is the concept of awareness, right? But what's it mean to be aware? You see? So that is the 6th element of the Bria that God created. And the 7th element is called motion. Everything is moving. Everything. You see, nothing stands still. Why? Why isn't there something standing still? No such thing. You know? Like the earth rotates around itself, it's one motion. Then the earth revolves around the sun, right? 18 miles a second. That's another motion. You believe we're going 18 miles a second? You believe that in, 1001, we just made 18 miles. Isn't that astounding? Nobody felt it, you know? And then the sun and the whole planetary system is moving at, if I remember correctly, at 27 miles a second, right? I think toward the star Vega. You know, like, what does that mean? 27 miles a second. You see, and everything is in motion. And they say it's impossible to stop anything. You know, like absolute zero is when a molecule or everything in the molecule stops. So they've gotten down, I think it's 300, what was it? No, it's 457. If I remember correct, 457 degrees minus 457 degrees, you know. And I think they've gotten to 1/1000th of that temperature, but they can't get to that absolute zero. Means everything stops. They can't get there, you know. It's like there's something built into this Bria that forces it to move, motion. So you have those 7 elements of the Bria, if you think about that we really don't really know well and understand and so on. You see. So this is the physical universe, okay. In terms of the spiritual universe, which he's going to mention, we have no idea what their fundamental constructs are. We have no idea. What makes up the spiritual universe? We don't know, you see. But in any case, the Ramchal says that there are 2 basic places. One is called the physical universe, and the other is called the spiritual universe.
The spiritual universe, is there time?
Yeah, there's time, yeah. Certainly, if they interact with us, there's certainly time. It would seem so, yes.
They're all waiting for the Geula.
Yeah, obviously there has to be a future,
Yeah,
which means there is time. It would seem so, certainly. You know? So the Ramchal, what he wants to do is define.
What do you think about life on other planets? They're very big into it these days.
Life on other planets.
Yeah, they're looking for that perfect planet that's called as life.
I think in a certain sense, I don't believe there is life on other planets. That's my personal belief, you know. However, even if they found something on another planet that would not contradict Judaism, why? Why wouldn't it contradict Judaism? Because the real question isn't so much, is there life on other planets? The real question is, what's their function? What's their purpose? Like, what are they supposed to do? You see? So it would just mean that, like anything else, I mean, what's the purpose of an ant that's crawling in your living room? What's the purpose of that, and so on. So if there are beings from other planets, they do not have the purpose that the Torah gave. You see, the ones who have the real purpose of creation are the Jews, because they have to rectify creation. Everything else basically has its purpose, which basically is an assist of the Jewish people. Now, how an ant can assist you is unknown, right? How any bug crawling in the forest can assist you is unknown. Yet every single thing that exists is created for that specific purpose, to bring about the end, or the tikkun haklali, the general rectification of the creation. We have no idea why. And that's the emunah, you see. That every
life on another planet, that has a Torah hashkafa. Intelligent life on another planet.
Well, like I say, I personally don't believe there is, but even if they found, it wouldn't contradict the Torah. The real question is like, what's their purpose? Yeah. I mean, the Martian comes over to you and say hi, if the Martian's there, and you look at the guy and say, excuse me, are you Jewish? And
Intelligent life on Earth.
yeah. That's a bigger chiddush. That's a bigger discovery. Is there intelligent life on Earth? That's the real discovery. I think they're still trying to search for it. But anyway, it's hard to believe that there is intelligent life on Earth. It really is, because people are so unintelligent, it's beyond belief. But it wouldn't be a contradiction to Torah. The real question is like, what's their point? What's the whole point of that?
Yeah.
But I don't think so. Look, although now they've discovered what's called exoplanets, thousands of planets, but none of them seem to have the fundamental elements that are required of life. Because life needs oxygen, it needs water, and needs a certain temperature.
That's only life as we know it.
Yeah, that's also true, yeah.
Well, you can find a planet with oxygen. What does it take for a planet to have oxygen?
Yeah. But the planets that they've discovered so far, basically all of them are called inhospitable. They just, Venus is like 900 degrees on the surface. It's like, forget it, you can't live there. 900 degrees and so on, But although they're desperately trying to find it, I think deep down, reason why everybody's so much into the pursuit of life forms on another planet, because if they found that, then they could argue and say, you see, man is not unique. You see, and if man is not unique, right, then you do whatever you want. Then forget about God, That's why the church was so disturbed by Galileo's discovery, because everybody thought in those days, the church especially, that everything revolves around the earth, because the earth is the center. Meanwhile, he found out that the moons of Jupiter revolve around Jupiter, not around the earth. How chutzpah! How dare they revolve around some other, which meant that man, this world, is not unique. It's like everything else in the Bria, It's Jupiter and there's us, So let's get off our high horse, that we're not so special. And if we're not so special, then so they chuck the whole religion. I think a lot of that. I think that deep down, that's the motive of why they're all desperate to find life on somewhere else.
So like the Yam HaGadol is the Mediterranean, even though it's not the biggest ocean, it's not even an ocean. So it's kind of like that. It's only Yam HaGadol because it's next to Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah.
I think that's what Chazal said. That's the Yam HaGadol near Eretz Yisrael.
So where are you going?
So yeah.
The point is that only with Ruchnius is something considered significant. But if you look at the Gashmius aspect, then there's nothing special about it. So the same thing with the planet Earth.
Yeah. Okay.
It's only special because it has Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah. Okay. That's what we believe in. But I'm just saying, I think that's why everybody's trying to pursue life, because they really want to de-emphasize the greatness of man. That man is not special. And then evolution is possible. Our grandfathers were really monkeys. This kind of stuff, Although with some people, you'd like to believe somebody. The grandfathers were monkeys. But anyway, certainly acting like monkeys. But and I think that's the underlying reason. It's the same reason why everybody loves Darwin. Because if man evolved, they forget about it. They just took God out of the equation. So what's the big deal? Look, in the end, everybody's looking for a Hester. Let's face it. Nobody wants a boss. And everybody is looking for a way that they can chuck God and his whole system. They're all deep down looking, because that's the ultimate conflict of man. How do I get rid of God? You see, because everybody wants to get rid of God. You see, from Adam Mauritian and down. Just the question is, what are they prepared to do to get rid of God? Well, scientists, what are they prepared to do is find some type of a human or some type of life form which will obviously, according to them, prove that man isn't special, and therefore man evolved based on what Darwin says, and the universe has an origin which is physical. It has nothing to do with spirituality. I believe that's really behind all of this, is to get rid of God and to get rid of his empire, so to speak.
That's why he has to send a Sandy to remind them?
That's a what?
That's why he sends them a Hurricane Sandy to remind them?
Yeah, well, no, but they just say it's the weather.
It's Mother Nature.
It's Mother Nature. Where does Mother Nature hang out? I'd love to know that. You know, I love the way it says Mother Nature. Mother Nature? Yeah. But anyway, it wouldn't in any way have any contradiction. I don't believe, you know. But besides, I don't believe they'll ever find it, you know. Because what they fail to understand is this. Here's the mistake they all make. Even if you found a planet that has the right conditions for life, correct? The right conditions, right? Which means the temperature is like our temperature, you know, it gets 80, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's it, right? And it's got oxygen, and it's got, water, it's got all the fundamental necessities of life, right? So what? How does life begin? Nobody knows. The odds of having a living thing form from any proper environment is beyond calculations. Whatever happened to that? You see, just because you provided the proper environment, whatever happened to the probability that life should form from any of this? I once told you that they calculated the probability of a human being forming with thousands and thousands of enzymes and hormones and organs and cells. It's beyond belief, right? Is a 1 followed by 1.5 million zeros. What kind of a number is that? That's not even a number. What?
It's a big zero.
No, that's not a probability. That's not conceivable at all, you know. And that's only a human. What about all the life? There are 7,000 species of ants. Each one's different, you know. So see, there are two problems in Darwin. One, how did life form? One. And the second thing is, how does the variations of life form? I mean, even if it started from one cell, assuming so, right? How do you go from one cell, right, to 10 to 100 million different species? And it's not enough. Mutations are not an answer, you know, whatever. I don't get into the whole thing, but there is no answer. Nobody knows. So even if they found, this is the mistake they all make. Even if they found, you know, the right conditions, so what? You're still left with the fact they can't even answer on Earth how it began, right? And Earth has the proper conditions eventually, right? So then how did it happen? So then why should it happen in another place? That's what they haven't grabbed their heads around. You see, that's why the nonsense of all this, you see, because the problem is much more than just the environment. The problem is the probabilities of life forming. You see, I mean, you think about a DNA, the DNA of a cell, you know, it's 4 billion rungs or 2.5 billion rungs or whatever it is, you know, and there are only 4 chemicals, and they form the rungs on that twisted ladder, because that's really what it is what is, I think, with 2 billion or 2.5 billion, whatever it is, how in the world did the first DNA molecule ever come into existence? And it should form the ability to make all the ingredients to make life. And then who assembles life? I mean, if you think about it, I always look at the two greatest nisim I've ever seen. How does one cell from a man and a woman, one cell, go from that in 9 months to a fully formed embryo? How? I mean, how does a cell know what to do, where to go, and how to stop? How does one leg know where to stop and the other leg knows where to stop at the same time? I mean, it's beyond belief, you see. And the second incredible miracle, which you can't never get over, right, is how in the world does a 2-year-old kid know how to speak English? How? This kid didn't go to school, didn't go to language school. Yet the kid, after 2 years old, what's 2 years old, If I want to learn French, it'd take me a century to learn French. You know what I'm saying? And I'm a lot smarter than a 2-year-old kid. Maybe not, who knows? You see, so how does a 2-year-old kid speak a full language which is grammatically correct? And it has but it has vocabulary, it has the proper grammar, it has the sequence of the grammar, which is syntax. How does it do it? What do you mean it imitates that? I want to tell you something. If I put you in China, yes, and you heard those Chinese speak, after 2 years, you still wouldn't know what in the world they're talking about. Because you have no reference really. Because language is not just nouns, I am, and you, no. There's verbs, there's prepositions, there's adjectives. How do you put it all together? It's astounding. Yet the Roshim obviously did it because how is anybody going to learn language? You know what I'm saying? How are you going to learn language? You're not going to go to school, and the Roshim needs everybody to communicate. It's a miracle beyond comprehension how the human brain of a 2-year-old kid can learn to pick up a sophisticated language like English or Chinese or Arabic. These are very sophisticated languages, you see. It's astounding. So those two miracles are always beyond belief, So that's the mistake that they all make. They think they can find the right conditions. Voila, as they say.
Nice place to visit. They find the right
Yeah. Well, it just means a new vacation home. You rent out condos. That's basically what it means, That's absurd. Why don't these guys just grow up and admit that there is no way that this universe or world could have come without a God? And that's the end of the mindset, Why don't you just give up and stop the nonsense and grow up, But anyway, yeah. What was going to say something? Yeah.
In Darwin's notebooks, he said there's one problem that used to keep him up at night. All these different species evolved differently. He couldn't explain how the basic parts of an eye are all the same across all the species. What, I don't know, iris, retina, whatever.
No, the reason why I couldn't...
he just, after a while, just discounted it.
Yeah, well, you know what? The problem...
It disproves this whole thing.
Well, you know why it disproves it? Because according to him, a species will, they will gain a certain advantage, as they call it, right? And that advantage, that will allow them to adapt better, and they will survive. The problem is that there are many organs in the body that half an organ doesn't work. So then why would they continue having that organ? You see, if you have an eye that has a round bulb, doesn't have a retina, like, why would you keep the eye? Well, you can't do anything with it, because the eye is a very complex organ. It's got 100 million cones. I mean, it's like ridiculous. Or what is it, 1 million cones, whatever it is, There's 120 million cones, whatever. Like, why would it even keep it? There's no advantage. It would take millions of years for the eye to develop. So why would the body even keep that? And how would that species that had these parts, why are they more advantageous than anything else? I mean, he realized that. Most organs are complex. They're not just one thing, But anyway, Darwin is Rahmanis. What can you say, Because he realized, he just denied what they failed to realize. it's not the design of the organ, it's the complexity of the organ. You cannot have, how in the world does the human brain evolve? The human brain is the most highly complex thing in the known universe. How in the world did that thing come into being? I don't care if you give hundreds of trillions of years, you know. I mean, it's like Fred Hoyle once said, famous cosmologist Fred Hoyle said, you know, he said the probability that, you know, this world evolved is the same probability, you know, if you had a hurricane that went through a junkyard, and all of a sudden when the hurricane left after like 4 minutes, right, there was a Boeing 747 sitting on the junkyard. I mean, he's right. The same probability. Would anybody believe the hurricane go through a junkyard, even if you had all the components in the junkyard? Well, that's a different story, right? But let's assume you had all the components, right? The computer, the cabin. I mean, it's the whole. You know, the hurricane went through it, and there it was. It's 747 sitting on the what? You know, and this is Fred Hoyle, a famous cosmologist and so on. You know, of course it's impossible. You know, but like I say, you know, these guys, you know, they'll never give up because there's an eternal war between man and God. It resembles, just to get a little politically correct here or incorrect, you know, it's the same eternal war against the Democrats and Trump. They'll never give up. You know, they just never give up. That's the same. Anyway, any questions? Okay, so we're now into the components, but it's a very interesting area. What was that?
We now have two.
Perek Hey.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk about just different things in this Bria.
You said before about the end of Perek Dalet. You said about that it somehow would relate to the Churban in terms of letting in the Satan.
Yeah. Yeah, which I'm talking about, because there are two tragedies which people do not realize, you know. The tragedy of Tisha B'Av is not just the removal, so to speak, of God, but it's the introduction of a satanic element that destroys and also gives other entities the ability to destroy. Which I'll talk about. I'll give a Tisha B'Av shir, you know, because I'll be here for Tisha B'Av, you know, and so on. But there's two things. The churban of the bais of the bais hamikdash involves two fundamental areas, you know, and we'll talk about that, you know, before Tisha B'Av, which was in 2 weeks, something like that. Actually, it's on Tuesday. So, yeah, 2 weeks. 2 weeks from this Tuesday, yeah. So that Saturday night, I'll talk about Tisha B'Av, you know.
When the temple existed, could an ordinary Jew, when they, you know, on the holidays, when they went to the temple, could they feel God's presence?
Yes, definitely.
An ordinary Jew.
First of all, there's no such thing as an ordinary Jew. Forget about that. Jews are not ordinary, you know. But anybody who approached the temple area could feel the presence of God. That's how powerful it was. What? We lost that, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we still have it. No, we still have it. What's called a smattering of that presence is still there by the Concealment, by the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. Yeah, that's what you feel. When you go to the Concealment, Maravi, the Western Wall, right, you can feel the presence. Many people feel the presence. They feel there's something there. What was that?
More than a show?
More than, yeah, sure, yeah. They feel. There are goyim that go there and they feel it. I remember I once spoke to a guy.
Jump around and shout, holy rollers. What do they feel? Hey, you know.
Well, they're feeling good about themselves.
You have to be attuned. You can't just go and show up.
Well, nobody knows who, but there are people that feel a presence. Yeah.
I mean that for example, the first time I went, it was like right after I got off, the day after I got off the plane.
Yeah.
I didn't feel anything because I just got off the plane. And only the next time I came, after being there to Son Yeshiva, and thinking about it and coming more prepared.
So maybe you had to shine up your vessel. You had to create a vessel to be recipient.
You once put it to me this way, I think it's very powerful. When the bais hamikdash was built,
Yeah?
there was no blockage in a person's heart. There was the Shekhinah, the presence of God, penetrated anything or forced itself by
Yeah.
the
Yes.
Now, with the faisal, the sleep on it, you sometimes feel, you sometimes not. It doesn't force its way into you. But by the bais hamikdash, it was impossible to go there
and not feel it. It was impossible. Yeah. Every Jew who went there felt. Besides, there were 10 miracles that were ongoing.
Yeah.
We just watched them, and you couldn't believe what you're seeing. You know, and you know, there was no. Imagine the bais hamikdash. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them, but the bais hamikdash was basically a butcher shop. Think about that. That's basically what they did. There were thousands and thousands of animals being slaughtered and then being cut up with their organs and burnt and so on. Yet there wasn't one fly in the entire place. Did you ever see anything like that? No flies?
They're all in South Jersey.
They're all in South Jersey, maybe. But there wasn't no flies. The smoke never always went up in a straight column, no matter how the wind was. The smoke never moved. It always went up. A hurricane go through that. The smoke just kept going straight. There were many miracles that took place in the 10 of them that took place in the bais hamikdash. You know, so you could be a maimon just by walking into the bais hamikdash. That obviously this is a incredibly spiritual place. You know. Okay.